Hello valued viewers, I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're in the F-15E Strike Eagle and we're looking at navigation as of July 2023. Navigation in this aircraft is a massive subject with no less than 15 navigation modes. Because it's so big, first we need to do an overview to see what we're covering in this video. Navigation can be split into three different areas. Navigation aids, these are elements of the cockpit we use to help with navigation. Steering modes, the different modes we can be in. And sequence points, three-dimensional points required for navigation. Everything in a green box is currently in the aircraft and working and will be covered in this video. Purple box is in the aircraft, but I've chosen to do those on a separate video. Everything in a red box is currently not in early access. First, navigation aids, we'll look at the TSD, Tactical Situation Display, the ADI, the Attitude Director Indicator, HUD Heads Up Display, UFC Up Front Controller, we'll do an overview of that, HSI, Horizontal Situation Indicator. The steering modes we'll look at today will be NAV, the default, ground track, course with course deviation indicator, course with plan, nav coupled with the autopilot, and heading coupled with the autopilot. Then we'll move on to sequence points and their manipulation. We'll look at the types of sequence points possible. Manipulating sequence points via the Up Front Controller. Creating sequence points via Mission Editor. Creating sequence points via Up Front Controller. Different ways of creating target points. And different ways of creating aim points and offset target points. Let's start with navigation aids. Welcome into the cockpit. We have 5 navigation aids for today. We have our TSD that we'll have on our lower screen, our MPCD. On our right screen we will have our ADI. Our HUD is our HUD, our UFC is our UFC, and on our left MPD we will have HSI. Why don't we start with the TSD? I prefer having the TSD on this coloured screen here because it helps with situational awareness and the coloured map. On the TSD you can see today's mission. It is a route starting here, following these points and ending here. We can have 3 routes, A, B and C. This is route A. Joining the 5 sequence points is this white line known as the course line. Each sequence point can be a different type of point shown by the symbol. This symbol here is the base symbol, which is obviously where we're starting at. This symbol here is a steer point 1, steer point 2. This symbol here, the square, is an ingress point, which will always be the point before a target point. Some people call it an initial point. And point 4 is a triangle. That's a target point. Target point 4 dot. The target point will always have a dot. Note there are 2 other points that are not on the course line. That is this point here. It is an aim point associated with steer point 1. It is aim point 1.1. And we have an offset point or an offset target point associated to target point 4 dot. This target point is target point 4.01. This is the syntax for these various points. Also on the TSD we have us, our own ship. We are this aircraft symbol here, currently facing that direction. We also know our current track. The track is the direction that the aircraft is moving, not to be confused with the heading, which is the way that the aircraft is facing. They will usually be separate directions slightly. Our current track is 266 degrees. Also, from mission bullseye, our aircraft is at a bearing of 152 degrees for 14 nautical miles. And the bullseye is represented by that symbol there. Regards the buttons and options, this guy here is currently not functional. Not functional. Not functional. Despite what it looks like, this is not functional. This is functional. We can either have our aircraft biased towards the bottom of the screen or in the center of the screen. This guy, again, is not actually functional. This guy shows that we currently have route A selected and we could cycle through the 3 routes, but we just have route A. This takes us to main menu. This turns on our video recorder, which is not functional in-game. We have various range scales representing the distance in nautical miles between our ship here and the left or right of the screen. And we could cycle through them like that. Associated with each range scale are an extra 3 zoom levels that we can access here. And I'll put up on the screen the details of each zoom level. Also, the orientation. We can either have the screen orientated so that the current track of our aircraft is in the up position on the screen, or we can have true north being the up position on the screen. Not functional and not yet functional. Next, attitude direction indicator. Along the top we have our magnetic heading tape times 10 in degrees. Our current heading is where the chevron points to. This guy here is our command heading bug. That is where we are commanded to fly to our selected point of interest. In this case, steering point 1A. This is our current calibrated airspeed and our current barometric altitude in feet. Again, our recorder, our main menu. Along the bottom, we have our turn rate indicator here and our inclinometer or slip gauge here. Here we have our feed. How is the ADI being driven? Currently by inertial navigation system, and I can't change that at the moment. Regards our attitude. This line essentially represents our horizon line. 10 degrees up, 20 degrees up, 10 down, 20 down. The waterline symbol represents our aircraft in the longitude, showing that currently we're heading down about 5 degrees below the horizon. If we were to roll left or right, then the horizon line and the pitch ladder would roll accordingly. It shows our attitude of flight. Roll indicator at the bottom, 30 degrees, 60 and 90 degrees roll. Next is our HUD. At this point, it's important to make sure that we are in nav master mode, so click nav master mode. Focus on the HUD. At the top again is our magnetic heading tape and our chevron pointing to our current heading. Here is our command heading bug, again showing our commanded direction to our next sequence point. Our next sequence point happens to be steer point 1A. A 3D representation of that is this circle here in front of us and below us. We know we've got steer point 1A selected because it says here. The current distance in nautical miles to that steer point is 18.1 nautical miles. Because we're in nav master mode, we also get some timing information. Time to go in current parameters to that steer point is 0 hours, 2 minutes and 56 seconds. In the UFC, we can change that from time to go to time of arrival. We have again our bullseye information from bullseye to us of 152 for 14 nautical miles. Next, we'll shift down to the UFC. We're just going to have a quick overview and we'll come back to this in more detail. But for the UFC, there are 4 screens we're interested in. Menu 1, which is our default. Menu 2, Data 1, and Data 2. Menu 1. From here, we have the ability to enter a steer point submenu, an autopilot submenu. These are things that are just relevant to navigation. A low altitude warning submenu, a TACAN submenu, and a to be added terrain following submenu. Menu 2. Here we have information on ground collision warning system. We have our EGI status. We have bullseye information and nav update. Data 1 menu, which contains our bearing and our distance in nautical miles to steer point 1A. Regards that steer point, we have an estimated absolute time of arrival of hours, minutes, seconds, or we can change that to our time to go. We can add true speed or ground speed to the HUD. You can see ground speed there, true speed there, or have that turned off. We can also add our radar altimeter to the HUD there, which will differ slightly from the barometric altimeter. We have our mission time here, and we have our wind direction and speed in knots there. And data 2, we have steer point selected, also our look ahead steer point there, our current ground speed there. And that's all for today. Back to menu 1. Next, HSI, Horizontal Situation Indicator, typical for most modern aircraft. We have us in the center here. We are facing that direction there. Around us, a magnetic compass rose. Here is a two-dimensional representation of our currently selected steer point. We can change the range represented by the distance between us and the edge of the compass rose in nautical miles up here. 20 will be fine. Shown at the top here, this is kind of hard to show, but this line here is the lubber line, representing the direction ahead. Not to be confused with this guy here, the diamond with the tail, which is our current track symbol. As it happens, they're pretty much lining up at the moment, but later on you'll see that our track or our direction of movement will differ from the lubber line. We have our nav bearing pointer, which is shown by this triangle. It's actually an arrow here showing the direction to our currently selected waypoint. We also have our command heading marker or bug, which is these two squares here. The command heading bug is actually separate from the nav pointer, but in the mode that we're in at the moment, which is the default, which is nav mode, they are linked together. We'll explore that further in the video. We can have the HSI on our colored screen down the bottom and it will give us color coding, but it works fine in monochrome. Regards our options, we have auto sequence here with it boxed when we traverse over or within 2 miles of one of our steer points. It will automatically update the system to our next steer point. Turned off, we'll have to manually update to our next steer point. Default is on. We have our command heading here. In any mode except nav mode, we can change that command heading, and we will later. To change it, you either push the button up or down or use the scratch pad to enter an absolute figure. Next, our nav modes. You remember we have 15 nav modes and we can choose them from the HSI. We can go to heading mode if we want. You can see we can change the command heading there. We also have ALG. According to the manual, it will be Autonomous Guidance System, currently not in early access. We have our TACAN here, TACAN Master Mode, and we can choose between CDI and Plan Submodes. Or we can have our course, and we can choose between CDI and Plan Submodes. We can have our ILS via TACAN here, our ground track here, our ILS via nav here, or our default nav mode. Main menu, non-functioning record. We also have a selectable course here, not relevant in nav mode, but in some modes we'll be able to change the course again by up and down buttons or via scratch pad. Finally, we have our nav data block here as per the HUD. Steer point 1A selected, direction, distance, time to go, and our TACAN data block here. TACAN is not going to be covered in this video, we'll do that separately. And that is the end of our navigation aids. Now we can start on steering modes. The default will always be nav, and luckily it's super simple. So with nav selected and our current steer point in this case being 1 route A, if we look in the HUD, we've already gone over this earlier on, but we'll go over it again. We have our command heading bug there. All we have to do is fly so that our chevron is on the command heading bug, and then we will be heading towards steer point 1A, a 3D representation of steer point 1A there, and we've already talked about our nav data block there in the HUD. Our ADI again shows the heading bug and our current heading there. We've just looked at the HSI and that symbology, so all we need to do is unpause, roll left slightly. We are now on heading for steer point 1A, and we'll just run it through super quickly. You can see the distance decreasing at the bottom right, 12 nautical miles, time decreasing to 1. We look at our TSD, we can show we're going over the steer point now. Now that should auto update to steer point 2, and you can see it's now steer point 2A. Follow the command heading bug at a heading of 339. Pause. I guess the only other thing I want to show is that we could go to data 1 here. We could change our time from time to go to estimated time of arrival. And we've now got the A showing that the estimated time of arrival will be 6:30:20 at steer point 2A, and again you can add our true and ground speed. Next is going to be GT ground track, especially useful when you have high winds, and that's what we're going to demonstrate now. So we're going to reset back to mission editor, and we're going to put some big winds on, 50 knot crosswinds to deal with, and we're just going to move steer point 1 a little bit just to get perfectly matched with that crosswind. Right. Ground track mode will allow us to fly a certain ground track with a corrected heading for any wind. And we have a large 50 knot wind today. Let's prove we have our wind with data. 1, we can see we have a wind from direction of 037 at 50 knots. That's a big wind. So in our HSI, in fact, always make sure we're on master nav mode. We're going to go on ground track. We need to select a course here. We're going to make that course the same course to steer point 1. And we know, because we're in data 1 here, that is a vector of 293 degrees. So let's enter 293. We can either increment like that, or we can, from the scratch pad, 293, and push one of those buttons. We can see that the command heading bug or marker will change to that direction there. Now, if we unpause, and whoa, that's a big wind, we are going to fly again to the commanded heading on the heading tape. We also have extra symbology in terms of a bank steering line or bank steering bar. It's going to be shown in the HUD there. It's also, I'm just going to pause it, it's also going to be shown in our ADI there. Also, we can see our data block has changed in the HUD. We now have a ground track with commanded track of 293 degrees and the current distance to steer point 1A again and time to go. It's pretty simple. Power up, carry on. Now, we're recording this at a slightly difficult time because the steering bar is currently not working in certain wind situations, and that is according to the manual as well. So for the time being, we're just going to follow the heading command bug. We're flying a very large crab because look, this is where our aircraft is heading or facing. This is our track. That's where our aircraft is actually going by the velocity vector, and we can see our crab angle quite obviously as we fly. As we get closer to the steer point, we're going to get some deviation between the steering bar here and the heading bug here. Go to the heading bug. I'm going to speed time up now. 5 miles, 3 miles, 2 miles, and over the top we've reached steer point 1. So that shows using ground track mode to reach steer point 1A in a 50 knot crosswind. And Simba just pointed out a really interesting thing to show you. Here's a good example of where our ground track can differ from our lubber line. So we're here, our lubber facing line is there, our ground track is now there, off from the lubber line because of the 50 knot crosswind. Out of interest, we've now automatically updated to steer point 2, and that's now pointing towards steer point 2. Next, nav mode is course, of which there are 2 sub modes, and for this I just want to remove the wind or remove most of the wind. Okay, so off we go again. Nav master mode to our HSI, TACAN and course. CDI or plan, we want CDI, course deviation indicator. Course is going to allow us to approach a point, in this case it's going to be steer point 1A, along a certain course. Why would we want to do that? Well, for instance, if we wanted to attack a target from a certain direction or approach a runway from a certain radial. Our fictitious example is we want to approach steer point 1A from, let's say, a course of 310 degrees for some reason. Well, we've already got steer point 1A selected, so we now need to enter the course, and we can again either use the buttons here or type it in. So scratchpad 310, go. We're now going to get guidance from our bank steering bar here and our course deviation indicator line here and our deviation dots here, 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 each showing 5 degrees deviation from our intended course. We also have a direction shown by this arrow here, and this arrow also indicates our deviation line. In terms of operation, it's pretty simple. We want to fly so that our deviation line here matches our course line here, and our deviation arrow here is in the center of our dots here. If we do that, it will make sure we're flying our course of 310 and we get towards steering point 1A. So unpause, off we go. Power up. So the deviation indicator line is currently off to the left. We want to chase it left. We've got 20 nautical miles to get to waypoint, so plenty of room. If you're used to doing this kind of thing in an aircraft, it's pretty much second nature. If you're not, it looks a bit like black magic and it can be really awkward. So the best way to do this is to try it until you get good at it. So I'm chasing that deviation line to the left, and what you'll see at some point is it will start to center towards our course line, mirrored in the HUD and in the HSI symbology. In it comes. So you can see on our HSI and our arrow on the HUD, it's moving towards the center. Now the skill here is intercepting it. So as it gets closer to the center, our angle off our course line wants to become less. And that's what I meant by the experience bit. And then we're going to kind of marry them in the middle there. And whomp, I've overshot. Whoops. And that's a kind of typical noob thing to do. So let's correct again. We've still got 11 miles to get this right. Going on the arrow in the HUD in the center. And of course deviation line in the center on the HSI. Oh dear, I'm not doing very well at this. Actually, we might just make it. Yes, we're going to make it, look. 8 miles to go. Right. Turn back in. We've pretty much now got the course deviation line or indicator married. It's going to become, the closer we get to the waypoint, it will become very difficult because obviously the distances and the angles kind of get messed up, but almost got it there. 2 miles away from steer point. I'm just going to pause it there. I think that's close enough. You can see that it has indeed got us to our steer point. We're like 1.5 miles off. But most importantly, it's got us there. Bearing in mind, I've just been following the deviation indicator at our correct heading. We're exactly 310, which is bearing in mind that we've not got high wind on today. What I asked us to. It's got us to our steer point along a course of 310. Other notes to make, the bank steering bar is also shown on the ADI, and you can see in our nav data block we have course selected. Now I would like to reset and repeat that, but for course plan mode. Plan mode is very similar. It does the same thing. It gets us to a steering point in this case on a certain course, but the way it does it is slightly different. So let me just set up quickly. So course plan. This time, rather than the course deviation indicator being shown on the HSI, we just get an absolute course line to follow. Maybe I want to zoom in as well to give us a bit more accuracy. Whoops, wrong way. I prefer this mode than the CDI mode. We still have the CDI shown on the HUD and the bank steering line here, or bank steering bar. Enter the number again. What was it? 310. That's it. Unpause. Off we go. The reason I prefer this absolute course line method is, well, I feel I have more control over it. So all I'm going to do is fly at my leisure using the HSI, that's what I'm using now, to that course line. I'm going to speed things up. I find it much easier. And I'm going to manually merge with it. Again, I've got the course deviation indicator shown on the HUD, which I can use if I need to. And you can see I'm doing much better this way. This is the way I like to do it on all of my modern aircraft. That's pretty good. I'm going to go within 10 miles now. Oh, looks like I have to be more than 10 miles. Fine. 20 miles. That's pretty much it. Speed forward. Stay on the line. And pang. That's it. We've reached it. 0.7 miles away. You can see I've reached the waypoint perfectly, and I'm on a course of 310. That is CRS with CDI and plan. Reset again. Next is nav mode again, but this time coupled with the autopilot. And this is where it gets super space age and super cool. So I'm just going to set myself up again. Okay, we're in nav mode as default. This time we're going to go to autopilot submenu here. You can see because we're in nav mode and we have nav master mode turned on in the autopilot, we have an option for steer mode nav. This will automatically fly our entire waypoint chain for us. It's super easy. We are going to unpause, whoops, get roughly aligned. We're going to select it and we're going to turn autopilot on with that button there, and we can add altitude hold if we like. It will now fly us with altitude hold on our entire route A, which is pretty smart. Fast forward, so I'm hands off, I'm looking behind. Speeding up, get us to our steer point 1. It's going to turn us. Oh, it's spooky and I don't like it. It's going to get us to our steer point 2. Still spooky and I don't like it. No, it will just fly the steer points. It will not go and drop your bombs for you. Anyway, you can see there how it will follow the chain. Pretty cool, huh? Reset again. We're going to do the same now, but with heading mode. So I'm not even going to bother setting our jet up fully this time. I'm just going to nav. I'm going to go HSI. I'm going to go heading. I'm going to go autopilot. I'm just going to trim us out a little bit here. Heading mode will just allow us to select a heading bug here, and it will follow that heading until it runs out of fuel pretty much. Well, I want to go on a heading of 330. Press it in there. You can see we've got steer mode heading available now. I'm just going to unpause. I would like that, please, sir. And go. And put altitude hold on as well. Why not? It will give us our standard 30-degree bank to get to that heading. That's it. It's on 330. It'll just go forever now until you turn it off. And that is autopilot coupled with heading mode. Well, one thing I've missed, the data block changes as well. We can see that with the nav coupled mode or the heading coupled mode, it will show here, for instance, autopilot heading 330, and something similar with the nav mode. So far we've looked at navigation aids and we've looked at steering modes, but it's now important to understand more about sequence points, which is what the entire navigation system is based on. We're kind of doing this video in reverse. We're following the flow of the user manual. So the types of sequence points we can have are steer points, aim points associated with steer points, target points, offset points associated with target points, initial or ingress points, aim points associated with those initial points, base points, and bullseye point. Steer point define a basic route of flight. They are displayed with a number followed by the letter of the route, 1A, 2B, and so on. Aim points are always associated with a steer point. Up to 7 aim points can be assigned to a single steer point. They are displayed as the number of the assigned steer point followed by a decimal point and a 10th digit. So 1.1A, for instance. Target points are specialized points for attack, which when selected in air-to-ground master mode automatically become designated as a target. They are displayed with a number followed by a decimal point and sometimes a letter, so 1.A. Offset points are visually associated with a target point. Each target point can have up to 7 offset points assigned to it. They are displayed as the number of the assigned target point plus a decimal point followed by a 100th point and sometimes a root letter. For instance, 1.01A. That would be offset point associated with target point 1, and it would be offset point 1, route A. Initial or ingress points is the last steer point before a target point. Their numbering is the same for that as the steer points. Aim points for initial points are always associated with a given initial point, up to 7 per initial point. They are displayed as the number of the assigned initial point followed by a decimal point and 10th digit, 1.1A, and so on. The base point is a single point common to all 3 routes, which is normally the place where the INS was aligned, home plate or the base. It always displays as B. and bullseye used as a reference point for all the assets in a given mission for providing bearing and range from that point to target or selected position. Next, let's look at selecting via the UFC some of our sequence points. So let me just set the jet up. So just to jog our memory, we have steer point, aim point, steer point, ingress point, target offset point, and bullseye, and our base. Currently we have selected steer point 1A. I want to select steer point 2A. We can do that in the UFC either from menu 1, which is our default, or data 1. To do it, all we do is type in the scratch pad what we want to select, in this case 2 or 2A. Because we already have route A selected, we don't have to put the A. But if we wanted to select route B, steer point 2, we would have to go shift B like that. But we don't have a route B, so we're just going to get rid of that. So 2 and then press that there. We now have steer point 2 route A selected, and we can see that via the nav block there. We can also select other types of points. So what about aim point 1.1 there? Well, it's the same thing. 1.1 without the A. We now have aim point 1.1 selected, and you can see it translating onto our HSI there. What about target offset point 4.01? Well, let's do that. Same thing. 4.01. Don't need the A. Go. We've now got target offset point 4.01. And finally, why don't we do our target point? So this shows how important the syntax is. You've got to get the number, the dot, and then the numbers after that correct. Target point 4 dot. Next, so 4 dot go. We now have target point 4 dot route A selected. Just to prove that, we can go through to air to ground mode, and if it is a true target, it will be converted into a designated target, and it's TTT. It is a valid target. Back to nav mode. Next, let's have a more thorough look at the other UFC pages. We're not going to do any inputting yet. I just want to understand the entries a bit better. So first, our steer point submenu. So let's click here without anything entered in the scratch pad, and we're through to our steer point submenu. Here we have our currently selected steer point, and again we can reselect it from here. So 2, we now have 2A selected. Steer point is a 3D point. It has a lat long, so a northing in this case, an easting, and an elevation attached to it. We can change the northing, the easting, and the elevation via the scratch pad, and we'll do that slightly later in the video. In the future, instead of lat long, we'll be able to use UTM, but currently it's not in there. Finally, this guy, and this guy are currently not in early access. Next, data page 1. We've been through this, but we'll go through it again. So regards the current steer point we have selected here, that's target 4 dot. We have an associated vector bearing to it and distance to it in nautical miles. Also an estimated time of arrival absolute, or a time to go to get to that point in current parameters. We've seen that before. We can show the true and the ground speed on the HUD or nothing. Our current wind, as we've seen before, from that direction at that speed in knots. Our current mission time, our radar altimeter that we can add to the HUD. Otherwise, just to show that we can again enter or select a different point. So let's select steer point 2, ping, steer point 2. Next, data page 2. I've been advised not to mess around with this page. It will be super cool when it's all working, but it's not really implemented yet. Just to give you a rough gist, this is our current ground speed needed for the calculations. This is our selected steer point from this page. This is our look ahead steer point to allow us to plan further ahead. And what we will be able to do is have interesting timing information about those steer points or sequence points on our route, and also calculate fuel burn for those parts on the route. But again, it's not really working properly at the moment, and so we've been advised not to mess around with it. Next, let's start adding some steer points, some target points, some aim points, and some offset points. We'll start with Mission Editor. So here is our aircraft with our route A selected. Let's just delete that and start again. We'll create it from scratch. So add new aircraft, add it there, make it an F-15E F-15E, make it flyable, make it start at 16,000 feet and 350 knots. This is all standard mission editor stuff so far. With waypoint add selected, create sequence point 1 there, sequence point 2 there, 3 there, and 4 there, roughly where they were before. As standard, these will all be steer points. Next, let's change one of them to a target point. Let's change number 4 to a target point, in fact, and let's just show selecting it from scratch. So select steer point 4 to change it to a target point. We just changed the name. So in name here, we put hashtag capital T, Tango. That is now a target point, which will also make the steer point before it, steer point 3, an ingress or initial point. Next, let's create our aim point associated with steer point 1. Super simple. Click on steer point 1. Go to this menu here, navigation target fix points. Add. I'm going to put it about there, I think it was. And we need to give it a comment to tell the Strike Eagle what it is. If we remember from earlier in the video, the syntax for an aim point is a number, the name of the associated steer point, dot a tenth, so 1 in this case. We now have aim point 1.1 set up. And let's create the target offset point again. So select target point 4, navigation target fix points, create it somewhere, I don't know, there. Again, the naming structure as before. So this is a target offset point. It needs to be the target point. So that's 4 dot hundredth. So 0, 1. We always start with 1. That is the target offset point done. That's it. So let me jump in the aircraft and look at the points and make sure it's worked. And we can see base steer point 1, aim point 1.1, steer point 2, ingress point 3, target point 4, and target offset 4.01. All good. And finally for today, we need to show how using the UFC we can create steer points, how we can create or convert steer points into target points, and finally how we can create aim points and target offset points. First, to create a steer point from scratch, we're going to go into the steer point submenu. We need to type in a new number for the steer point, and it must be the next in the sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4 sequence points. We want sequence point 5. So 5 on the scratch pad. Press there. We've now created steer point 5, route A. We need to enter a northing and easting for this steer point. Let's hop over to our F10 map. Why don't we just make it on bullseye here? So put the mouse cursor over bullseye and look at the top left of the screen. Well, that's in UTM format. That's the wrong format. So back to the cockpit. We need to work out which format it requires. It's hours, minutes, and seconds. So that's 3-digit decimal minute. Back to F10. Left, Alt, and Yankee until we find 3-digit decimal minutes. That's precise. That's 2-digit decimal minutes. That's X and Y. That there is 3-digit decimal minutes. Hover the mouse cursor over bullseye and copy the northing and the easting down along with the elevation in feet. Okay, I've put that in my kneeboard. First, the latitude, which is going to be north or south. In this case, north. We're in the northern hemisphere. Shift 2 for north and enter the numbers. 42 degrees, 0, 9, 6, 0, 4. Click on there. Northing entered. Now, longitude is going to be in the east, so shift east. Because of the way longitude works, we always add an extra 0 at the beginning, or should I say the degrees should be 3 digits. So in this case, add the extra 0 and 41 degrees, 46 and 1, 4, 7 and enter it there. We also need an elevation. It was plus 16 feet. We don't need to put the plus if it's above sea level, but we would need to put minus if it was below. So 16, enter elevation. That is our waypoint added. To prove it, let's go to our TSD and we can see just under bullseye we now have steer point 5 added. We could also select that steer point if we wanted. So back to menu, 5, enter, and we can now navigate if we were on nav mode to steer point 5 route A. What if we wanted to create a brand new target point? Well, there are two ways of doing that. First, we could create a new one from scratch, and all we've got to do for that is exactly what we've just done for the steer point, but instead of 5, it would have been 5 dot, and then create it. We won't bother doing that. But what we can do also is to convert an existing steer point to a target point. So why don't we do that? Let's select one. How about 2? Let's convert steer point 2 to a target point. So first we select the steer point 2, select. Now 2 dot will convert it to a target point. Ping. Steer point 2 has disappeared and now become target point 2, preceded automatically by now ingress or initial point 1. Those are the two methods of creating target points. Now finally, what if we want to create aim points for a steer point or an initial point, or offset target points for a target? Well, first of all, why don't we create an additional aim point for a steer point or ingress point 1. Now it's already got 1.1. Let's make 1.2, and you can probably see where this is going. Go 1.2. Type it in. We've now created aim point 1.2 in route A. We can either do northing easting, which we've shown, or we can not do UTM. UTM is not in yet. Or we can do range and bearing, or we can do direction and range. Let's do range and bearing first of all. From sequence point 1, I want a range 8.9 nautical miles. Stick it in there. And we want a magnetic direction, due west 270. There, and that's done. It's created. We now have aim point 1.2 attached to sequence point 1 there. Now I want to show off direction, and to do that I'm going to create a new point. So let's create a target offset point from target point 2. So I would like 2.01 will be the first in that sequence. Create. And this time we're going to do direction and range. The way this works is we have a cardinal offset in feet in latitude and a cardinal offset in feet in longitude. I'm not going to bother selecting a real target, so let's just make something up. I'll do longitude first this time because I can. So I want to go shift either east or west. Let's just go east. And let's go 3,599 feet. Enter. And I want to do northing, southing as well. And I'll just go north, shift, north. 6,599 feet. Enter. We've now created target offset point 2.01, offset from target 2 north by 6,599 feet and east by 3,599 feet. And there it is. I didn't really do it enough, but you can see there is the offset point 2.01, which concludes today's video. Like I said, TACAN and ILS I will do in a separate video because I can make that look a bit more cool. That was a lot of information to digest, and obviously I'll have timestamps in the video, but just to reconfirm what we did today, we did the 5 different navigation aids. We covered 6 of the 15 available steering modes, and we looked at sequence points, the types of points, manipulating them via UFC, creating sequence points via Mission Editor, creating sequence points via UFC, and creating target points and offset points. I hope that was useful, and see you later.